It doesn't seem that long ago that we sat here together discussing the review of the reMarkable Paper Pro, the original, the bigger brother of the Paper Pro Move. And I'm just going to flash back to a particular clip that some of you might remember.
I think the screen size overall for me, whilst it's a very personal thing, it's a bit too big. It's definitely usable and I'm going to continue to use it. But if they released a mini version at the same time as this, I definitely would have gone for the mini version.
It's almost as if reMarkable watched our video. Maybe they did. I'm watching you, reMarkable. Well, you're probably watching us. But either way, if you are, I like your products. But today, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of the reMarkable Paper Pro Move. And now I'm going to do my review a little bit differently to some of the reviews you might have seen already of the Paper Pro Move. I'm going to do my pros and cons list purely on the aspects unique to the Paper Pro Move. Now, those who are familiar with reMarkable, you'll be aware that the Paper Pro is essentially just a bigger version of the Paper Pro Move with a few exceptions. I'm not going to talk about the pros and cons which are the same as the reMarkable Paper Pro. I'm not going to talk about the colour canvas display because it's the same. I'm not going to talk about the technology and how the pen works. I want to talk about specifics to the Paper Pro Move for some of you who may be deciding whether this is for you or not, or whether or not you want to get one of the other devices. I think this review will be helpful. If you're interested in that original review of the Paper Pro, I'll leave that in the description below. Now, I'll start off by saying I do really like the Paper Pro Move, and that's no secret because of the clip you've just seen. I've always wanted a reMarkable of this size. Now, there are a number of pros and things I like about it, but there's equally quite a lot of cons, some of which I haven't really heard discussed. So some of these might be interesting for you to hear for those who are a bit on the fence about getting one of these. So let's talk pros first. One of the core differences between the Paper Pro and the Paper Pro Move is they have changed the back. And now the back is not aluminium anymore. They've actually changed it for what feels like a plastic material. Now there is reason for this, and that is because it makes it more repairable. Now I've never had to send one of my reMarkables back for repair, so I don't know what the cost of that would look like. However, it goes without saying that when it's not a unibody shell on the back and that you can actually take the back off completely, it's going to be easier to repair, and hopefully that's reflected in any repair costs, which is nice to know. As per reMarkable's website, the original Paper Pro is 229 ppi and the reMarkable Move is 264 ppi. And those who aren't very techy or might not know what that means, essentially means that your writing and the ink that appears on your display is going to be slightly crisper on the Paper Pro Move. Now, numerically speaking, it seems like quite a small difference in ppi, and I personally felt like I wouldn't really see a difference, but actually, having spent a lot of time on this and now spent more time on this, I can definitely see a difference, and the writing is noticeably clearer, which is really quite nice to see because I did think at times it appeared a little blurry on the Paper Pro, and when you compare this to the reMarkable 2, it feels like night and day for me in terms of the clarity of that ink coming through on the screen and the lack of blurriness around the letters or your writing, which you get on the reMarkable 2 and a little bit on the Paper Pro. That seems to mostly be gone now. There's lots of devices out there which are 300 ppi, but I don't really see much of a difference between that and the Paper Pro Move. So we're heading in the right direction. So let's talk form factor. Now, I really like the small size, but with the small size, they've also made the device slightly thicker. And now I thought, well, if it's trying to imitate paper, surely a bit of extra thickness will probably make it feel not quite as good. Obviously, the reMarkable 2 is the thinnest of all three, and then the Paper Pro got a bit bigger, and now the Paper Pro Move is even bigger still. However, I've noticed when I was writing on the Paper Pro that you can feel the screen flexing when you're pushing down on with your pen, which is very unnerving and has actually led me to the point where I don't take my Paper Pro out and about because I don't trust to put it in my bag because the screen flexes. I believe it's glass. Obviously, you don't want that breaking in your bag, even with the case that I have. However, this feels noticeably sturdier and I don't ever get that flexing when I'm writing on the Paper Pro Move. I feel very comfortable putting it in my bag and I feel very confident that I don't think it's going to break unless I did something silly with it. Now, again, speaking of size, The whole marketing around this was in effect saying that it's designed to either put in your pocket or your handbag, something like that, to take it about with you. Now, I will say that you're going to need a big pocket to put it in. Let me just show a few images here. For me, it actually does fit in most of my pockets. However, I'm aware that there will be a lot of pockets which this doesn't fit in. Even my jacket pocket, which I thought is kind of what it's designed for, it was very snug and it actually poked out the top there. And I found it quite funny. reMarkable has a load of pictures on their website showing the move, and one of the main models showing it off has a shirt with 2 massive pockets on the front of his jacket. And it did make me think that I'm pretty sure he didn't arrive that day in that shirt. I'm pretty sure reMarkable picked one with particularly big pockets just to try and emphasise the point that it is for your pocket. But having said that, I will say it's still very portable. Even if you don't put it in your pocket, it's much more portable than carrying around this thing, I find. And again, even more portable than the reMarkable 2. And obviously with that portability, it's also a lot lighter as well, which just helps if you've got lots of items in your work bag. Whilst we're discussing the dimensions of the device, I really love the new form factor. So much so that for me personally, it has left me questioning if I actually need my Paper Pro anymore and just stick with the Paper Pro Move. And now hear me out on this. This will depend on how you use your reMarkable, but I mostly use mine for work notes, personal organisation and journaling, and all that I can do on this smaller screen. I don't need the larger screen for those things, and it's great if I can do them all on the move rather than having to be at my desk. And as I say, I don't really take this out and about. Just in case you aren't aware, this isn't compatible with a type folio, so if you do a lot of typed text, then certainly you'd want to go for one of the other options. However, I get the reMarkable for the writing experience with the pen. I personally don't use it for typed text. For me, it sort of defeats the point a little bit of having that paper-like experience. So I'm actually thinking, do I need either of these other devices now? I think ultimately I will keep them for review purposes and continuing to compare the reMarkable's future devices. But actually, if I was a consumer looking at this, I'd consider, what do I actually need the reMarkable for? And if you don't need it for larger note pages, and you aren't interested in the type folio, and it's not just something that sits at your desk and you would like to take it out and about, then dare I suggest that this might be the only one you need? Something to consider. Speaking of typed text though, ironically I thought this device would be redundant for typed text because it can't use the type folio with it. On the reMarkable 2 and the Paper Pro, I've hated typing with my fingers like this, and I find that the screen isn't the most responsive. It's not terrible, but it's nothing near the likes of a laptop or an iPad. But I actually found, because this device is quite small, it almost feels like I'm texting on a larger phone, and it feels a lot more natural to me than trying to type on one of these without a type folio. So the typing experience, when in portrait mode, is actually not that bad. Although I will say my spelling is atrocious and I definitely need a spell check, and that is something we don't currently have. Obviously you can create your document, then send it to another device and then check it. But honestly, I find myself skipping that step and just going straight to the laptop to do my typed text, but that's just my experience. Lastly, in terms of design, I know it does look like essentially just a smaller version of the Paper Pro. I do have to emphasise how sleek and premium it looks. They've made the bezels around the side a bit different, added a bit of extra detail with another extra layer, which tries to make it look like a stack of paper, I suppose. But as soon as I unbox this thing, it does give that Apple vibes where it feels and looks very premium. Now let's take a pivot for a second. Let's talk about some of the things I don't like about the reMarkable Paper Pro Move. And there are some which might be quite concerning, depending again on what your use case is for the reMarkable. With the new dimensions of the screen of the reMarkable Paper Pro Move comes a few cross-compatibility issues if you are using the Paper Pro or the reMarkable 1 or 2. Just due to the nature of this screen being longer vertically and the ratios being different to the other devices, your documents do appear slightly different on this screen than they do on this screen. It's obvious that that was going to happen. However, I think people were expecting that reMarkable might do a better job of creating workarounds within the software. I will say it's not terrible. However, when you open, for example, a PDF document, and on the move it shows the full PDF page. You have blank space at the top and at the bottom of that screen, and because it's had to zoom out to show you that full page and you've got the blank space in there, it makes the PDF smaller, a little bit harder to read, especially if it's something like a daily planner. For me, it then becomes too small to interact with, and trying to interact with hyperlinks again becomes quite clumsy. You can of course zoom in. By zooming in, you cut off the left or the right side of that page, and it becomes just a bit of a pain to use in my experience, and it sounds like that's the general consensus coming from the community as well, is that the cross-compatibility could use a bit of work. Having said that, if you don't have the other devices, it's not something you really have to worry about too much. Somewhat of a workaround is that you can use the reMarkable Paper Pro vertically like this, and then you get the full width of that PDF page. However, when you have it vertically, obviously it cuts off maybe 2/3 of that, which is fine, but then you find yourself having to scroll up and down a lot, because when you're scrolling on PDFs, especially ones with colour, the reMarkable flashes quite a lot. It just becomes, again, quite a cumbersome experience and not one that I enjoy personally. So that's PDFs, but let's talk about the native templates that come on the reMarkable. So the normal templates, when you select a new notebook, all the options that appear, you tend to have a similar issue there, that if you want to go ahead and zoom in so you get the advantage of the full template, that's fine at first when you're writing on it, but if you go ahead and flip to a new page or the next page, it then zooms out back to the original view where you get the gaps, and then you have to go ahead and zoom in again. Now reMarkable might be able to do something about that, so perhaps that's something that will change in future. So in summary, there are workarounds to this scaling issue. It's not the end of the world, however it can be an annoyance, especially when you're spending this much money. You kind of want the integration to feel a little bit more seamless if you're working between various devices, sending documents back and forth between your reMarkables. Obviously this is meant to be on the move. Let's say you have this one at your desk and you're sending notes over and it's not always corresponding, or your vertical notes from here just appear in the middle of the page on the Paper Pro and you've got big gaps on the side. Again, you can flip it horizontally, but then the note-taking experience isn't quite as good. Just something important to be aware of if you are considering purchasing the Paper Pro Move. I don't really use EPUBs on my reMarkable, but I have read that you can adjust the view of EPUBs on the Paper Pro Move screen, so you don't have the same issue on there. I don't really consider reMarkable an e-reader. There's better devices out there for that, but if you do like to read books on your reMarkable, for EPUBs it's not as big of an issue. Now let's talk about what I'm particularly passionate about, and that is the battery life.
Hey everyone, just a quick one before I get into the next portion of the video. For those interested in getting more out of the reMarkable, I have a template shop which has a number of tools that are really useful for their reMarkable, such as daily planners and meeting notebooks. I'll leave the link for that in the description if you're interested in checking it out. Thank you.
reMarkable advertised 2 weeks battery life on the Paper Pro Move. I live by this rule of thumb when I'm looking at reMarkables. You take their advertised battery life, divide it by 2. So that's what I've always done previously. I don't know where they get their advertised battery life statistics from, because they're always way out. My rule of thumb for the Paper Pro Move is still wrong, because I would say the battery life is about 3 to 4 days, and that's with moderate use. With heavy use and using the light a lot, maybe 2 days. Now actually the shorter battery life doesn't bother me massively, it's just the fact that they keep advertising battery lives which are just totally out of touch with reality. Put it this way, I genuinely think if I left my reMarkable Paper Pro Move fully charged, left it by the side of my bed, I still don't think it would last 2 weeks. I just pop it on charge every couple of days and it keeps it topped up, so it's not a big deal, but don't expect it to last 2 weeks. Now when it was first launched, the biggest subject that people were talking about across the reMarkable community, and on that note I do have a Facebook community page for those who are interested in tips, templates, guidance, accessory reviews. I do that all on my Facebook group and you can join for free below. But one of the main topics which people were talking about and which got people quite annoyed was the price. Now I will say the price even surprised me. When I realised that it was the portable version that they were releasing, I thought maybe they'll pitch it around £300 to £350, which is about $350 to $400. However, the prices start from £400 for the Paper Pro Move. Audacious is the word that comes to mind. Now, don't get me wrong, I do consider reMarkable devices premium accessories. However, I do feel like the pricing is slightly out for this one. That's just my opinion. Ultimately, price is just what people are willing to spend. And as I say, I'm sure they'll sell lots of them. Sadly, at that price point, it will exclude some people who maybe were really interested in this particular form factor, but just can't afford the £400. The thing which bothered me most about the price was that you can't buy the Paper Pro Move without the pen. To me, that feels a little sneaky. The Paper Pro pen works on both the Move and the Paper Pro, and so those who already have this device and have this pen, you have to buy another pen, rather than the potential of saving, say, £50, $50 and not getting a pen. That's something that I would particularly like reMarkable to change in future, if you're listening. Right, it's summary time. If you are particularly interested in this form factor and you know that you would like to write your notes on a page like this, then I would say this is absolutely brilliant, go for it. And also perhaps people who maybe don't already have a reMarkable, if you know you'd like the smaller screen, then I'd skip the other models and just go straight for this, so you don't experience the cross-compatibility issues. If you're quite happy with the form factor of the Paper Pro or the reMarkable 2, I would be tempted to say save your money on this one, because the device itself isn't groundbreakingly different. It is essentially the baby brother of the Paper Pro. As I said in my video right at the start, if they released these two at the same time, I wouldn't have got this one. I would have just gone straight for this one. So it all comes down to your personal workflow, your personal taste in the screen size. Overall, it's a fantastic little device. For me, it's a joy to use, it's a joy to look at. It feels so premium every time I just pick it up. It makes me actually want to write and want to draw, which is a sign of something that you know is a good device. However, again, before you spend your hard-earned money, I invite you to consider your personal use case and if this would suit what you need an e-ink writing device for. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe. I release lots of reMarkable related content. For those who are new to reMarkable, I have a series of short, useful tip videos, which are about 30 seconds long and teach you the basics of getting to know your reMarkable. Please leave a like if you found it helpful, and I'll see you on the next one.